We are scheduled to begin. It looks like about half of us are here, but that's okay. We will go ahead and get started. I am Ebony Peebles. I am the Division A Director. I will
Teresa, Hovland, area 12.
And I don't want to miss our District Director.
Fire hall, no discussion.
Nowhere near a wall.
If you haven't already figured it out, the restrooms are directly to. If you need to take a phone call, I'm sure I don't need to tell you this, but you can go out to the left and to the there are refreshments, no coffee. However, there is a coffee shop right outside the door to the left. Quick review of the agenda. We will begin with an exercise. Then we will go into storytelling. We'll take a short break, maybe 10 to 15, depending on how we're doing on time. We'll come back. We'll cover mentoring. We'll end with evaluations. We're scheduled to be done by 3:30. If you haven't already gotten refreshments, please do so. Please sign in. It's nice to have a name tag on. If you're interested in the raffle, over there as well.
Over there?
Are there any questions before we get started? I will begin with the opening exercise. It's an icebreaker. We're going to practice a little bit of improv. To help me, Beverly, Bowen-Bennett, who is the first priority of the raffle, Beverly's going to help us practice a little bit of improv. This technique is called yes and. So the way it works is you pair with another person. The first person makes a statement. The next person has to agree with that statement, whether it's true or not. Yes, and add to the story. So you're going to create a story, a scenario that maybe has a natural ending, or you just choose to end it.
We're timing us for 2 minutes.
Yes. Timer, please give us 2 minutes so we can demonstrate how this works.
All right.
Begin.
Oh, you want me to begin? I wish you should have had my ticket already.
Yes, and refreshments at the back.
Yes, and I'm trying to watch what I eat, and I think those have sugar in them.
Yes, and see how that's a conflict of interest now that you've been appointed the CEO of McDonald's.
Yes, and I've been needing a good job. You see, I don't know if I'd be a CEO, though, because I'm not very bossy.
Yes, and I accept your offer to stay in place.
Yes, and that's a hard one for me. If you have something to say, yes, yes, and oh, can I visit you in your office for downtime?
Yes, and it's full of burgers and fries.
Yes, and I'm vegetarian.
Yes, and we also carry delicious salads.
Yeah, and I do eat from time to time. Could I encourage you to have more kale than you?
Yes, and let's discuss my salary.
Yes, and whoever thought I was in charge of your salary?
Yes, and I meant celery.
Yes, and I misheard you and thought you said salary, which means money. celery is not fair.
So sometimes it just dies out. We end on a punchline. So what we like that, we just demo that, what we like to do is practice. So partner with someone whom you are not in the same club with, preferably. So
Find a partner.
find a partner.
And if we have an odd number, right?
Hey, stranger.
I'd like to go for
If you haven't started, so I'll tell you when y'all start, y'all to stop. So let everybody find their partner.
She's coming to you. I also love to.
We have to get rid of this body. Yes. So we need to get rid of the body quickly, but we also need to get rid of it thoroughly.
That's a great idea because
Yes. And maybe we can speak about this process later on. Yes, those are the bodies.
yes, and will help to
Get rid of the body thoroughly and quickly, and legal training be able to revolutionize the understanding.
yes, and then we can have
Yes, yes, we could really help those messages. So how are we going to get rid of this body? You're right, it wasn't a statement. I need to make a statement. So we need to get rid of this body now, and I'm thinking about ways to.
yes, and what do you think the best way would be?
I think the best way would be volcano.
Yes, and I think you can just throw it in the ocean.
Yes, maybe a volcano in the ocean. That would double the getting rid of it.
Yes, and what happens if a volcano erupts and flies out and goes into an island?
Well, that's a question. Well, I imagine, yes, and I would imagine that if you throw the body in a volcano, it would be burned.
Well done.
Now you're mid-story, but time's up. We have time to try. So if you were not led off to the next person and choose any scenario to begin your story and let the other person continue it. Flip your partner and we'll do it again. Ready? Now.
Okay.
No, I started. Today's segregation day.
Yes, and has there been a great
What? Golfer. Yes. And there are so many interesting golf courses around. Yes, some of them are. And we need to come up with a creative way to afford being able to go golfing at these expensive courses.
The weather is young.
Yes, and I have started carrying a small sledgehammer in my golf bag for just that purpose. difficult to not ask questions.
Yeah.
It's difficult to not ask questions. It's your turn. It's your turn to build a story. It's difficult to do it with your wife. Any other observations?
I experienced this several months ago. I thought we be doing that until we had our conversation in the middle of the parking lot. I had realized I hadn't been doing that at all. So that's my goal, is to incorporate it into my actual life.
I will definitely be using it at work, yes.
I realized that yes and could be the new filler word in many of our meetings.
Yes, and that can make your meetings more interesting.
Yes. And page our add the topic we want our
And if you're doing this in a club or with somebody like today with him, we learned we had two things in common with that. We both like electric cars, and we were on the Saints fans.
Who did?
Who did?
Yes, and I found it helpful with my wife to explain Toastmasters, and she gets a greater appreciation for what I do.
Nice. All right.
This was, I'm sorry, I've already forgotten. Dawn that was the first thing I wanted to know when we were chatting. I had to introduce myself to her, and then she responded to introduce herself to me, and then I thought that was important. Yeah, good.
All right. I can encourage you to continue to do that. I want you to listen. You have to wait until they finish before you can continue a story. It forces you to collaborate. I disagree with you, but maybe I'll give you some credit and add my 2 cents. And it allows you to be creative. Of course, you can be creative. What can I think of on the spot, right? So one lucky person is going to a book, yes, and it's our first of 5 raffle prizes. So I'm hoping everyone has entered. There's a ticket line up here. Accepting and building on what others have initiated. Yes, and is the best teamwork advice for the stage or the board. So get your tickets ready. Mine. The first winner, the ticket number is 857 513.
Bad.
Oh, wow.
I bribed her, if you want to know the truth.
Yes, yes.
Yes, and I. Yes.
If our presenter is ready, I will begin his introduction. The next presenter, Grindrod, is a storytelling year or so, he's been telling lots and lots of stories. In a way, he picked up a few pointers he believes might help us in our own storytelling. So today, he's going to share those pointers with us, and along the way, might even tell a story or two. So here's Grindrod with enthusiastic storytelling.
Thank you, Ebony. Hello, everyone.
Hi.
In the world of public speaking, there are two broad categories of presentations. One is informational speeches, which we all know about, business speeches, selling products, pitching products, educational seminars like this one, where we convey information such as facts and figures, opinions and arguments, sell products. The other category is story and storytelling, which is a broad end that includes really an infinite supply of type and expression. For instance, one very popular type of story type is Hero's Quest. Think of Star Wars, King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, The Hobbit, the Lord of the Rings trilogy. In just a bit, I'm going to tell you a Hero's Quest tale that comes from Japan and conveys a little bit different twist on the genre. Also included in that big tent are origin and creation of Adam and Eve, a Winnebago origin story, which native Indian story that reads eerily like Genesis. Also included are tall tales, legends, fairy tales, personal stories, stories about famous people, stories that teach important life lessons or warn their consequences. There are also love stories, humorous stories, bedtime stories, scary stories, and on and on. In fact, it's been said that God loves stories so much, He created people so that He could have an endless supply of them. That's such a great quote. That comes from a book called Says How by Kevin Kline, or Kling, I guess. He's on NPR. Now, where he got that quote, I don't know. But I'm sure he didn't think of that himself, because I've heard it several other places. Unless I forget, stories can also spice up our informational speeches. And I'm going to tell you a couple stories that fit that bill very, very well in just a bit. Speaking of which, I have it on good authority that stories should also make up a significant portion of your informational speeches. Recognize this?
Yes.
The professional speaking manual, our old legacy program that some of us are still working on there. Project 1, the keynote speech, says that a professional speaker will usually fill a 25-minute presentation with 10 2-minute stories. 10 2-minute stories. That meaning, if you do the math, that's a story every 30 seconds. And I am really falling behind here. So scratch that. Because I want to tell you really what I want to accomplish in this presentation today. And it's really simply this. To convey to you a few pointers or a few points that I have learned over this past year and a half, telling lots and lots of stories, pointers that I hope will help you even just a little bit in improving your own storytelling. So to jump right in, the first storytelling pointer that I would like to offer concerns introductions. Storytelling stories work very well with introductions. So do informational speeches for that matter. But with stories, it's critical. Because unlike information speeches, which get to the point right away in the open, at least they're supposed to, stories generally take some time to set up. For instance, first you have to describe the characters, you have to establish the setting, and by the time the plot unfolds, you're sometimes well into the meat of the story, and then your audience is left wondering, well, what the heck is going on? You know, they haven't caught up yet, and they have to spend a lot of mental energy trying to figure that out instead of just sitting back and enjoying the stories. So included in your introduction, you need to tell the audience basically what your story is about. Sometimes even often telling them what the moral is up front. And sometimes you even have to tell them the ending before you even get into the story proper, which I know sounds crazy and counterintuitive, but after you've told stories for a while, if you don't do that and you see that blank look on the audience's faces, well, kind of like that look I see on yours right now, you'll realize that what I'm suggesting here really is quite important. So let me show you what I mean. I'm going to begin with the story from the hero's quest genre, as I mentioned at the beginning, which is a Japanese folktale about an artistic young boy who saves his village from an evil goblin rat. And it's called The Boy Who Drew Cats. A long, long time ago, in a small country village in Japan, there lived a farmer and his wife who had 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls. And back in those days, just as it used to be here, as soon as the children were old enough, they were expected to help their parents with the work on the farm. Now, the oldest boy, who was big and strong, was able to help his father with the heavy work by the time he was 14 years old. And the 2 little girls, well, they learned to help their mother almost by the time they could walk. But the youngest boy, whose nickname was Nico, which means cat in Japanese, was too weak and sickly to help much with the farm work, and it was obvious that he would never grow big enough to be a farmer on his own. So one day, his parents told him, Nico, tomorrow we're taking you to the temple village and ask the priest if he will accept you as an acolyte and educate you for the priesthood. So the next day, after his interview, he was accepted into the priesthood as an acolyte. Now, Nico, although quite small, was exceptionally bright. And in no time at all, he learned and did everything that was expected of him, which pleased the old priest very much, except for one small thing. Whenever Nico was left alone, he'd draw pictures of cats. Something he'd done virtually since the day he was born, which is why his parents nicknamed him Nico. Because while they and the other kids were out in the fields working, Nico would often be left alone. And when Nico was left alone, he drew pictures of cats. Beautiful pictures of cats. Exquisite pictures of cats. And he drew them everywhere. He drew them on pieces of wood, on pieces of rock, slabs of rock. He drew them on the side of the rice corn and the farm wagons. He even drew them on the walls of his house, which was okay at home. But when the priests walked through the temples, each day they saw more and more pictures of cats. Cats drawn on the temple walls, cats drawn on the pillars, cats drawn on the white paper screens, which you see in temples in Japan. And when they opened the sacred books, there on the margins would be pictures of cats. Beautiful pictures of cats. Exquisite pictures of cats. But Nico was warned that this wasn't proper, that he must stop doing that right away. But he didn't stop. He couldn't stop. Because you see, he had what's called the genius of an artist. And it was for that very reason he couldn't go on. He wasn't qualified any longer to be an acolyte. So one day, the old priest called him to his side and he said, Nico, my boy, it breaks my heart that you can't remain in the temple any longer. You see, You were never meant to be a priest. You were meant to be a great artist. But before you leave, let me give you one piece of advice, which you promise never to forget. Nico, wherever you go, avoid large places at night. Stick to small. Avoid large places at night. Stick to small. Nico repeated over and over to himself as he started to tie up his little bundle of clothes for leaving the next day. But he couldn't discern what it meant, and he was too afraid to talk to the old priest to ask him what it meant. All he could do was just say goodbye. So sorrowfully, the next day, Nico left the temple, and he wondered where it is he should go. He's afraid if he went back home, his father would be angry with him and punish him for disobeying the priest. Then he remembered hearing about a village on the other side of the mountains that had a very large temple, much larger than the one in his own village that had many, many priests and many, many acolytes that lived there. And he decided that he would go over and ask if they would accept him. Now, in those days, news didn't travel very far, especially as far as the other side of the mountains. So Nico had no way of knowing that in that other village there lived an evil goblin rat, as large as a water buffalo, which had killed and eaten which had taken over the temple and killed and eaten all of the priests and acolytes that lived there, and then terrorized the people of that village, they would lock themselves away in their houses every night and bar their windows and extinguish all their lamps, the light from which they were afraid would attract the goblin rat. And it was that night that Nico arrived in the village, where every door was locked, every window was shuttered, and there were no lamps shining anywhere, except for one. High up on the hill that shone from inside the huge temple, that the goblin rat lit every night in order to attract travelers, which he would then kill and eat. So Nico, seeing no one, walked down the main street of the village, the darkened village, then up on the hill and stopped in front of the large wooden temple door, and reached up and drew the heavy iron ring back and clanged it against the striking plate, which to his surprise opened the door as it was unguarded and unlocked. "Hello?" Nico said, poking his head aside. "Is anyone here?" No one answered. So he went inside and, seeing the lamp, sat down beside it, figuring, well, any minute now a priest or an acolyte would certainly come by. So he sat and waited. And as he waited and he watched, he saw that everything in the temple was covered with dust and cobwebs. And he wondered, why would they let it get that way? When he spotted one of those white paper screens, just like the ones that had gotten him in so much trouble in the other temple when he drew his cats on them, yet they were covered with dust and cobwebs as well. So he cleaned them off, figuring no one would care since they let them get so dirty, and he began drawing his cats on them. Now, there were lots and lots of screens, so Nico happily drew a great many cats until at last he became very sleepy, without ready to lie down to sleep when he remembered what the old priest had told him, Nico. Avoid large places at night. Keep to small. Now, the temple was very large, of course, and Nico was there all alone, and for the first time he began to become a little bit afraid. So he searched around and he found a little cabinet with a sliding door in front, which was just wide enough to allow him to crawl through. And he crawled through and shut himself up for the night and fell fast asleep. Until late in the night, he was awakened by a terrible commotion, screaming and fighting and tearing and gnashing, which was so terrible he was afraid to open the cabinet door even a little to poke out, to peek out. So he lay very still, holding his breath in fright, until a long while later, after the fighting had stopped and the early morning sun began to peek through the cracks in his little cabinet, Nico built up enough courage to open that sliding door just a little and peek out. To see that the temple floor was covered in blood. And lying dead in the middle of it was an enormous rat, a goblin rat. He wondered, who killed it? There was no one in the temple but himself. And then Nico realized, and then he saw that the mouths of all of the cats that he'd drawn the night before were red and wet with blood. They had killed the goblin rat. And at last Nico realized what the old priest meant when he told him, Nico, avoid large places at night. Keep it small. Now Nico never became a priest, but he remained living in that village and became a great artist. And the cats, which he drew on the screens in the temple that night, well, they still to this day hold a prominent place in that temple, which is one of the most famous in all Japan. My friend, Larry Crack, who has written over 100 books, not 100 books, excuse me, over 10 books. I don't want to give him too big a head there. He's written over 10 books on stories and storytelling. And he wrote a very interesting article this last year, which he put in Story Art magazine, which has been around for at least 100 years, where he talked about 5 different ways to write a story. And I want to just point out 4 of these, because they do apply to us. Number 1, he says, write a story to be told verbally. Characters and scenes must present a precise picture, which is what the level we're at, right? We are presenters and tellers. Number 2, he says, to condense the same story to be added into a speech. So you can take the same story, the story that you tell, then you can condense it to add into a speech. Number 3 is write the same story to be read aloud in narrative form. And finally, write the same story to be read only. For instance, if you're writing a book. And the reason that I bring that up is because some of the stories that you'll either tell on your own, or more likely, more often to be included into an informational speech, will be stories that you'll have garnered from somebody else's book or article that you've read. And those books or articles obviously are not written in a form to be told in their original form. That kind of transformation is something that's up to you, and you'll find in your informational speeches, and even just in storytelling, you're going to have to do that quite often. Take a short story and be able to turn it into a story to be told. You're virtually having to rewrite it. And the same goes with the informational speeches. And to be honest, I can't really tell you how to do that, because I have never really had to codify it myself. But I can show you with this next story, which is by Steve Sandfield, and it's called What He Could Have Been. If you were to compile a list of the biggest financiers and industrialists, American industrialists, at the turn of the 20th century, the J.P. Morgans, the Andrew Carnegies, the John D. Rockefellers, included in that list would be a man named Morris Silverman. Yet it's unlikely that you'll ever run across his name mentioned in any mainstream source. However, his life story is really quite extraordinary. So I'd like to tell you that story, because I think you'll draw from it, as I did, a good deal of personal inspiration. Morris Silverman and his family immigrated to the United States in New York City in 1910 from a small Jewish shtetl, which is a village in Ukraine, where for many years he worked as a shamus. Now, a shamus is a caretaker of sorts, somebody who maintains the synagogue and the surrounding grounds. And in the old country, they were even the official grave digger for members of the congregation who had passed away. So when Morris Silverman heard that they needed a new shamus in the Second Street Synagogue on the Lower East Side of New York City, he couldn't believe his luck, and he rushed right down there to look into the job. And upon his interview, the synagogue president was quite impressed. All the knowledge and experience he gained from his previous post, he thought would transfer over nicely into his present position. So he asked Mr. Silverman to sign the application, and he could get started right away. And Mr. Silverman bowed his head, lowered his head. "You can't read or write, can you, Mr. Silverman?" "No, sir," he replied. "I was orphaned at an early age in Ukraine. Never had the opportunity to go to school. Now, I can recite the Torah from heart, but I can't read it or write." "I'm so sorry," acknowledged the president, "but here in the United States, here in America, shamans must be able to read and write." So Mr. Silverman didn't get the job, but a member of his congregation who was appraised of the situation, a man named Joseph Stein, he was a tailor, asked Mr. Silverman if he could stop by his shop, where he gave him a few extra needles and a spool of thread and told him, "Now you can go out on the street and sell these for a few extra pennies. That will help a little bit at least." Which he did. And the next day he returned and asked Mr. Stein if he could now purchase a few more needles and thread with the small profit that he had earned. And by the end of the week, he was selling needles and thread and scissors and thimbles on the corner of Mott Street from a wooden tray that he held up by a leather strap around his neck, which soon turned into a pushcart, and then a little store, and then he finally ended up owning the entire building where his still little store was located, plus the one across the street, and 3 more a block over, and an additional 3 that he was renovating downtown. In 15 years, Morris Silverman had gone from selling a few donated needles and thread to becoming one of the richest and most powerful real estate moguls in New York City. When the time finally came for him to consummate the biggest deal of his life, which he needed $1 million to conclude. And the only place to get that kind of money in New York was Chase National Bank. So he made an appointment, and on the day that he arrived at the bank, he was escorted up to the executive suite, where a man named Albert Wiggins, the chairman of the board of the bank, personally met him at the door. "Please come in, Mr. Wiggins, or Mr. Silverman, please have a seat." And he sat down on the opposite side of a huge polished mahogany desk. "Mr. Silverman," the chairman began, "I've been following your career in the papers for many years now, and I deem it a great pleasure to finally meet you. You, sir, are the epitome of the American dream. Having come to America not long ago penniless, by your own initiative and hard work, you have now become a man of power and influence, and I deem it a privilege to finally do business with you." And with that, Mr. Wiggins pushed a large open checkbook and a gold fountain pen across the desk and said, "Mr. Silverman, fill it out for whatever amount you want, and we'll leave it done." Well, Mr. Silverman looked down at that open checkbook and then back up at Mr. Wiggins and said, I have a confession to make. You know that I came from the old country, but what you may not know is I never went to school and thus never learned to read and write." "I see," Mr. Wiggins said. "But sir, do you know what you could have become if you had?" Silverman shrugged and said, "Well, of course, I would have become the shamus at the 2nd Street Synagogue." Now I'm going to go off the reservation a bit, something I want to do from time to time, and venture into an area of storytelling that in my almost 6 years as a Toastmaster, I have not heard one presentation of, and that's Bible stories, which is a head-scratcher, because it may be that I just haven't been around or just missed out, but I tell Bible stories to secular groups 2 or 3 times every single month, and Bible stories are some of their favorites. The trick is, don't proselytize. Tell them as the pure stories that they are and treat them that way. So to show you what I mean, and perhaps inspire you to maybe try this on your own, I'm going to tell you a Bible story. In fact, it's one of my favorite Bible stories from the book of Jonah, which is the story of Jonah and the whale. And the reason it's one of my favorites is first and foremost because it has a happy ending. And second is because it conveys a touching depiction of the prophet Jonah with his all too human failings and all too human virtues, which to me make him approachable and real. Like he could have been my next door neighbor had I lived back then. So, to begin, let me tell you a little bit about Jonah. Jonah was one of the earliest prophets mentioned in the Hebrew Bible who lived 800 years before the time of Jesus in a little northern border town in Israel called Hovland. Now, we don't know for sure whether Jonah was married or not, but we can surmise that financially he was well off. Whether he was extremely wealthy or not, I don't really know, but we do know that he was probably, I don't know, upper middle class for his time. But what we do know for sure is that Jonah was hard-headed. Some say grumpy. And would get angry after laying out his argument. Someone would still disagree with him. How can you not see that I am right and you are wrong? He would tell them. Perhaps not in so nice a fashion. Which is a perfectly human trait. I mean, it's a predictable human trait. We all do that. But Jonah, they say, took it to extremes. And one day crossed the line when he got angry with God. Because God asked him to do something which Jonah didn't particularly agree with and certainly didn't want to do. And that's where our story of Jonah and the whale begins. With God commanding Jonah to go to the city of Nineveh and tell the people who lived there, the Ninevites, that if they didn't change their wicked ways, their city would be destroyed. Something which Jonah probably might have preferred to see happen because the Ninevites were his mortal enemies, who in the past had attacked his hometown of Gath-Hepher, killing many of his neighbors and friends. So why, he wondered, would God ask him to give aid and comfort to his enemies? And after laying out his argument, well, God, of course, didn't change his mind. So, letting his hard-headedness get the better of him again, Jonah took his dispute with God to the next level and went down to the port city of Joppa on the southern coast of Israel, where he hired a boat and crew to take him out onto the Mediterranean Sea and sail him as far away from Nineveh as he could possibly get, hoping that being so far away, God would relent and maybe replace him with someone else. Find someone else to go to Nineveh and preach. Find someone else to do his job. Because Jonah, regardless of his excuses, was all too humanly running away from his obligations. Kind of reminds me of myself. All the times I've run away from my obligations, mostly by postponing them, procrastinating. Which is precisely what Jonah was doing, sailing away on that boat. He was trying to put off the inevitable, and I'm sure deep down he knew that. But the fact is, Jonah had a job to do. So after giving him a few days, God decided that he'd given him enough time to make up his mind on his own. And at this point, he needed a little prodding, a little incentive to move the process along. So after they sailed out a ways on their boat, God sent a storm. God caused a storm to come over that little boat, and not just any run-of-the-mill storm either. He sent a cataclysmic storm with towering waves and bolts of lightning, gale-force winds that were so strong they began to tear their boat apart. And Jonah, realizing this wasn't any normal storm, but one sent by God to convince him, told the crew that in order to save themselves, they needed to throw him overboard, and the storm would subside. But the crew refused. These men were seasoned sailors, and there was no way that they were going to abandon Jonah. So they pulled down the sails, jettisoned the extra cargo to lighten the load, then broke out the oars and began rowing with all their might, trying to outrun that storm. But as hard as they rowed, they couldn't outrun the storm, which only increased in ferocity. Till at last the sailors realized that what Jonah had been telling them was right, and reluctantly agreed to do as he requested and cast him overboard. Whereupon, a great fish, a whale as they tell it, rose to the surface of the water and swallowed Jonah whole, saving him from drowning, then dived deep beneath the storm, and which subsided as Jonah had predicted. And as the clouds cleared and the winds grew calm, the boat, severely damaged but still sailable with its crew, made its way safely to shore without Jonah, who remained in the belly of that whale for 3 days and 3 nights as it turned around and swam all the way back to Israel and spit him out on shore right where he originally set sail from. And there he sat, covered in wet, thinking, man, after all of that, the storm, the boat breaking up, being swallowed by a whale, who only turned around and swam all the way back to Israel just to spit me out where I started from? Then God said, Jonah, will you now do as I request and go to Nineveh? Not wanting to go through anything like that again. Jonah replied, I will, even though he still didn't like the idea. So he cleaned himself off, gathered up some supplies, and started out for Nineveh, which was a couple weeks' walk across the desert. And when he got to the city, which was a huge city for its time, over 120,000 people lived there, he began to prophesy and tell the people that in 40 days, their city would be destroyed unless they changed their evil ways and became better people. Which they did. Almost immediately. In fact, in a matter of weeks, much less than the 40 days that Jonah had prophesied, they had changed their evil ways, thus averting destruction, which fulfilled, at that point, Jonah's obligation. He fulfilled his obligation. He's done his job. He did what God had asked him to do. But that didn't mean he still liked it. I told you how hard-headed he was. Because Jonah seeing these Ninevites, his enemies, who in the past had attacked his hometown, now get away scot-free, that just stuck in his craw. Because changed or not, he felt the Ninevites still deserved at least some punishment for their past bad behavior. And feeling slighted, he once again got angry with God. So he stormed out of the city, climbed up a hill which overlooked the city, overlooked Nineveh, and made a camp, where for 40 days he sat and watched and waited to see if God would side with him or side with them. And when the 40th day arrived, nothing. Nothing happened. No fire rained down, no floods, no invading army. The city was just fine, because they indeed had changed their ways, and God, seeing that, forgave them. And that, my friends, is the end of the book of Jonah. But not the story of Jonah. Because recent archaeological evidence found near the current city of Mosul has determined, they believe that they have found the gravesite, the actual gravesite of the prophet Jonah. Mosul being built on the ancient ruins of Nineveh. So it's likely Jonah never left. Now I told you at the beginning that this story demonstrated that prophets are not I want to say immune, that's not the word I want. Prophets are not disqualified, that was the word I want, from being normal human beings. with normal human failings, as I said, and normal human virtues. The foremost being that we believe, or we can change, admit our mistakes, I should say, and change our ways. And on a higher level, the ability to forgive others and wish the best for them regardless of their past bad behavior. A lesson which Jonah had to learn the hard way, but he did learn it sitting there up on that hill, watching the people of Nineveh, his enemies whom he hated, yet he had saved from destruction. And I can only imagine he must have wrestled mightily with those conflicting feelings. But in the end, as the people of Nineveh marched up that hill with their families and their children, bringing him food and staying and talking, his hatred eventually melted. And it appears that at some point he moved back down into the city and lived amongst the people of Nineveh the rest of his life. Do we have time for one more? I have one more point that I want to make. One more pointer. And that is when I becomes the story, which is pretty simple and straightforward. When telling a story about yourself, either portray yourself as a contributing character, narrating a larger picture, or if you must be the star or the hero of the story, don't elevate yourself above the audience. Don't make yourself seem better than your audience. Either place yourself equal to, or better yet, a step below your audience. And I think that this last story demonstrates that very well. It's a short story that is garnered from an essay entitled The Starthrower, which was published in 1969 by Dr. Lauren Easley, which has been subsequently changed and twisted and rewritten 100 different ways over the past 50 years by 1,000 different people to support their individual agendas, whether they be motivational speakers or religious leaders or even entrepreneurs pitching their products and services for that matter. Which apparently didn't seem to bother Dr. Easley too much, something I'm thankful for, because now I'm going to tell you one of those counterfeit versions of the Starthrower myself. Because counterfeit or not, it's just such a wonderful, uplifting story. And when I finish, I'm going to tell you the end in a different way that is more in line with Dr. Easley's original version, which is more expansive and, in my view, breathtaking. But first things first, and I want to tell you the, not the conventional, but one of the conventional versions of the Starthrower. But I'm going to tell it to you in the first person. On the morning after I arrived, I left my room at the resort about an hour and a half before dawn to take a walk along the beach at Costa Bell. Early morning, I heard, was the best time to walk here before the Mediterranean sun turned the sand so hot it would melt the treads off your retread sandals, I should say. And as I stepped off the boardwalk onto the now cool sand, I discovered that it had been a particularly good morning for the predators. As a storm had come through overnight and had passed a few hours earlier, churning up the seafloor, uprooting clams and starfish and deposited them high up on the beach, where they remained exposed and vulnerable as the tide receded. And after the storm, the sand was littered with them. Thousands of starfish and clams as far as the eye could see. So, along with these predators, the seagulls, were also shell collectors. Locals who in the early morning would scour the beach for starfish and clams that they would put into buckets and then take home to clean and polish, turning them into trinkets and jewelry that they would sell to the people at the resort. So when I started off on my walk away from the locals, I headed east along a narrow trail just above the tide line. And as I walked for a while, I rounded a point. where off in the distance I saw a lone figure, a local that I surmised, who didn't appear to have a bucket or a shovel, as I said, the telltale sign of a shell collector. But it would occasionally stoop down and pick something up off the sand and then fling it out into the ocean just beyond the breakers. Hola! I hollered pleasantly from a distance. I didn't want to startle him or it seemed like a threat. But he knew I was there, and he knew I was a local by my gringo accent. But nevertheless, he ignored me anyway, and as I drew closer, I noticed that what he was picking up was a starfish, and then flinging that in the ocean. I don't mean to disturb you, senor, I said, but may I ask what you're doing? Which, as soon as I said, I realized how stupid that would sound. But fortunately, he was a kind man, and replied in a pleasant manner, I am saving these stars, he said. The storm, it has left them stranded up here on the beach, and if I don't throw them back into the water before the sun comes up, they will die. I see, senor, I said. That's very commendable, now wondering if you might be a little touched. But surely you must realize that there's miles and miles of beach and thousands of starfish. Surely you realize that you can't save them all. So what's the use? Do you really think one man can make that much difference? And seeming to ignore me once again, he picked up another starfish and flung it over my head, skipping it out into the ocean, and with a wide smile he turned to me and said, well, senor, you made a difference to that one. Which is a wonderful way to end a beautiful story. And you can see why the motivational speakers have picked up on this, mostly without attribution. But now I'd like to tell you the ending a second way, a way that is more in line with Dr. Beasley's original version. And when I do, I'd like you to keep in mind that he was a scientist. And I'll pick it up where the old man says, I'm saving these stars, he said. If I don't throw them back into the ocean before the sun comes up, they will die. Well, it's commendable, I said, but surely you must realize that you can't save them all. There's miles and miles of beach and thousands of starfish and clams. So what's the use? Do you really think that you can make a difference? And again, as I said, he picked up a star and flung it over my head, skipping it out into the ocean. You do not see, senor, he said. I am sowing these stars. Each one I throw will produce 100 more of its kind, completing the perfect circle of life. Then I too picked up a star and flung it into the sea. I understand, I said, and thought the star thrower is no longer alone. After us will be others, still others. Perhaps expanding as far as the rim of the universe where a genuine star is being similarly seized and flung by an unknown hurler of suns. The original. So just to review very quickly, the 4 pointers I'd like you to remember from this presentation are, first, the importance of introductions, which are critical to understanding your stories. Second is to figure out how to write your stories in a form to be told, not read. Don't be afraid to tell Bible stories. And don't elevate yourself above your audience. Stay in your place. So I hope you got something out of this presentation. I know it was a lot of storytelling, but I figure a presentation on storytelling should be telling stories. And so thank you for letting me present it, and good luck with your own storytelling. Now to Toastmasters.
I'd also add that part of being a good storyteller is actually remembering the story. So thank you, Brad. Nicely done. I'm here with my bag in hand, so you can guess it's raffle time.
If Beverly got 2 tickets, I vote that we move that we can't reach out there.
I think it was already taken.
This item, the title of the book is Public Speaking Magic, Success and Confidence in the First 20 Seconds. Whether it's a speech, a presentation, a webinar. I'm sure to draw the ticket, just so you know. Whether it's a speech, a presentation, a webinar, or even a casual conversation, we have just a few seconds to prove our value. How can we capture our audience's instant attention and support? By mastering our first 20 seconds. The ticket that was pulled is 857510. At this time, we are going to take a brief break. There's plenty of food, enough food to probably have an early dinner. So please eat. We will reconvene at 1:40 sharply.
Oh, nice.
Special announcement.
So how many of you are working in the legacy system and are either working on or finished your competent communicator? Competent communicator.
Right now, or previous?
Previous. How many of you have ever done a competent communicator? Okay. If you haven't, if you're working on having, so a competent communicator manual has 10 exercises. Figure if you're in pathways doing level 1 and level 2. This is kind of close. Maybe level 1, level 2, and one exercise for level 3 is not the same as doing a competent communicator. Now, in Toastmasters, we like to recognize people for educational achievements. So if you finish your competent communicator or you finish your path, hopefully your club recognizes you. But we like to recognize people for special achievements. And one of those achievements is what we call Triple Crown. Triple Crown is 3 educational awards in a year. Now, if you're thinking about the the legacy system, you're talking about maybe doing a competent communicator or a competent leader, and if you're going to do an advanced communicator, bronze, that's 10 more speeches plus a seminar, or if you're doing the advanced leader, that's being a club officer plus giving a couple of seminars. So there's a lot of work involved, and for Triple Crown, there's 3 educational awards in a year. So we have a Triple Crown. And the person who's earned this Triple Crown, I have seen this person showing up at Toastmaster events all over the place, all over the district, outside of the area of division where their club exists. And I know he received a Triple Crown pin in August. Well, that was for last year.
Wow.
So this is second Triple Crown pin, but it's earned this year, since July 1. So please help me congratulate Brian Lynn. Not to try to pin these on people. Thank you.
Next, we're going to hear about mentoring, but before we do that, it's time for another battle. Over 100 would you rather dilemma cards. Spark a debate with this would you rather mini game. Which situation would you choose? I actually did a mini version of this as table topics in my club this past week. So you can give people an option to choose would you rather this or this. Have pizza for life or tacos for life? And see how they segue if they don't eat pizza or tacos.
Sounds like truth and dare.
All right.
It's funny, I couldn't focus on it because you just keep moving.
Ticket number 857491.
There you go.
and Teresa Hovland have a combined 13 years in Toastmasters. Both have held various club officer roles. Both are currently serving as area directors. Both are passionate about the value of mentors. I'm sure we can all remember spending time learning from someone who wanted us to grow. Toastmasters is where personal growth can be accelerated through speaking and leadership opportunities. The best way to take advantage of those opportunities is by being or even having a mentor. The goal of these two Toastmasters today is for you to grasp the value of being a mentor or having a mentor, and to obtain information that will enable your club to start and maintain a mentorship plan. Let's welcome Lori and Teresa with the how-to of developing a club mentorship plan.
When I joined Toastmasters about almost 6 years ago now, I really had no idea what Toastmasters was. Somebody in our village said, hey, we're having a meeting downstairs at 11:30. Why don't you join us? And then somebody mentioned that Toastmasters has mentors. One of our club members gave a speech on being mentors. Why do we want to have a good club mentoring program? Well, this is a Toastmaster statistic, actually, that clubs have an average churn, which means members leaving and members coming in of 40%. So you can imagine you have roughly 40% of your clubs turning over annually. A very experienced Toastmaster that I've heard mention this several times has mentioned that in his club, the members who stay the longest are the ones where he has an initial conversation with them, an orientation type conversation with them. The longer that conversation goes, it goes to coffee or gather somewhere, the longer that conversation lasts, the longer that member stays in the club. And so that just clicked with me. It's like, I bet that has a relationship to mentoring, to assigning a mentor to new members. And so I heard this presentation by one of our club members on mentoring. I think it was the canned Toastmasters Legacy Mentorship Program out of the Successful Club Series or something like that. I don't remember exactly. That was almost 6 years ago. I said, oh, I'm supposed to have a mentor. So I asked for a mentor. Little did I know then, what I know now, hindsight being 20/20, I was a horrible mentee from this mentor. I was horrible. He mentored me on one speech, my icebreaker. And I don't think it was because of his intention that he didn't mentor me on more speeches. I think it was because I didn't recognize the engagement and the value that I had in this mentor I asked to mentor for me. And I discovered a little bit about myself and how I learned that I'm not real good with a one-on-one learning process. That I'm one of those that I observe people all around in whatever venue this might be, Toastmasters, and so many of you in this room, I have probably been observing you and like, I think that person does something very well. I should probably try to do that. So I find that I learn better from observing what's around me and then emulating those things that I recognize as successful, or what I perceive in my mind of what success is. But that was horrible for my mentor, that I didn't allow him to connect with me and to help me carry out the role that the mentor is supposed to do to help me identify my goals. What were my goals in Toastmasters? And so what we want to do, Teresa and I, as we talked this afternoon, is help us, all of us, identify what is a mentor, what's the difference between a mentor and a coach, because there's a big difference. Coaches are really identifying, helping you learn a particular skill to get better at, or to direct you on the team, so to speak. I played a lot of sports growing up, so the coach was the one that kind of organized all of us, but that coach wasn't specifically telling me how to be better at my skills for that team. Now, had I had a mentor, that's what a mentor would do. Says, what is your goal? How do you want to be a better softball player? What is important to you? A mentor would have helped me identify the specific goals that I wanted to catch and field better, and I wanted to hit better. And so the mentor would have helped guide me towards those goals. And so I didn't let my mentor guide me towards goals. I didn't even recognize that I had goals in Toastmasters until about 2.5 years in. I said, oh, there's this education program. If you do things, you get things like triple crown pins and things like that. Once I recognized those, I was like, oh. When I was area director first time 2 years ago, another district leader mentioned that you should always have a mentor. And if you're experienced, you should always be a mentor. And I recognize now that that's important, and made me reflect on how bad of a mentee I was to my first mentor. And that I also want to be intentional to recruit my next mentor. So what are the keys to the program? I don't want to look at you. Look at their, the good presentation skills that we don't turn our backs to the audience. So what are the keys to a good mentor program? Well, number one, you have to have mentors. And you have to recognize that there should be mentees. And I'm going to use two different terms here. I put it up there. In pathways, mentees are now proteges. In the legacy program, you have mentors and mentees. Now we have mentors and proteges. So being that we've been in Toastmasters a few years, we may interchange those two terms throughout, but proteges and mentees are the same thing. And the other piece that's essential is that the club recognizes the mentor assignment, because you want the club to be successful, so the club leadership ought to be involved in this mentor and mentee matchup, mentor and protege matchup. So those are the keys. You have to have mentors and proteges and assignments. Proteges.
It doesn't look like you have an app named Prodigy.
We're gonna jump back and forth. Both of us have different ideas on how this is gonna work. And you have some handouts that we'll talk about. One of them is specifically the presentation, so you can take notes. And I'm learning clickers. I've never used clickers before, so I went beyond where I was supposed to go.
That's okay.
Teresa.
Thank you. Thank you, Beverly. So the two keys for any mentorship plan program that a club has are mentors and mentees, as already just described. May I tell you all a story, a personal story, of a time when I was a mentee? Yeah? About 20 years ago, I decided to get a horse. Again, after many, many years. We had horses as children. And I love horses. I think I was born with them. I know I grew up with them. But now I was an adult at this time with responsibilities. I had a job, we had a mortgage, we had car payments. So when I got a horse this time, I had 4 very specific requirements. The horse that I picked out met 3 of them. Those 3 were, I wanted a young one because I wanted to grow old. So in horse terms, that's anything from maybe 4 to 10, because horses can live into their 20s very easily, and some breeds into their 30s. I wanted a gelding, which, if you don't know anything about horses, that's a male horse that's been castrated because I didn't want to deal with any kind of hormonal issues. I didn't want to have a mare who was wanting to be bred or a stallion that wanted to breed. I just wanted a gelding. And I wanted a short horse, about this tall. Because I hadn't been a horse owner for years and years, and I knew I was going to fall off that horse. And I didn't want to fall very far because I had a mortgage to pay and the fourth thing that horse that I wound up owning didn't have was I wanted a mild-mannered horse that I could just get on and go riding in the mountains with my friends. Trail riding, that's my passion. I don't like to go in circles doing ballet on horses because I will fall off. I like to ride in the hills. I bought Phoenix, 4 years old, about this tall, a gelding. Unfortunately, he was of the breed called Arabian. Okay, some of you know. So Arabians are horses that are very heady, they're very brainiacs, and they're very busy all the time. They have a terrible reputation for being difficult horses. He was just beautiful. He was drop dead gorgeous. I just bought it. And at about the 3-month period, I realized this horse is not the right horse for me because I cannot get this horse to do anything I want it to do without a battle, without a fight. And it got so bad that at one point I was ready at the end of a trail ride to sell him to anybody there loading up horses for $1,000 who had a space in their trailer they could take him because there was no pleasure involved. It was horrible. I was at the barn one day scooping poop, like any horse owner does, when a woman who was working with another person at the barn came down and moved on the stall door and said to me, I can help you with your horse. And I thought, okay. An amazing transformation happened over the next few months, primarily because I watched her do things with that horse that I wanted to do. I watched her take him across creeks. I watched her make him climb up hills. I watched her make him do all kinds of things that I wanted to do, and then it dawned on me, it's not the horse's problem. Chrissy taught me 3 valuable things that revolutionized my relationship with that horse. First, she taught me to breathe. Teresa, you're sitting on him and you don't breathe. You hold your breath, you get tense. And he doesn't know what's the matter with you. So he gets tense. Okay, I'll breathe. Second, drop your energy, Teresa. Drop your energy. You're as hyper as he is. Drop your energy. Because when you start thinking, what's going on? How come he's not doing what I want him to do? He starts thinking, what does she want me to do? I can't figure out what she wants me to do. And she's really stressed out. And then you get stressed out because he's stressed out. And you cycle like this. Stop it. Drop your energy. Okay. She showed me how to do that. And thirdly, the most important thing was, horses are herd animals. Well, I knew that. You can watch any National Geographic show and see herds of horses. There's always one in the front and one at the end. But with 2, yes, you can have a herd of 2. And one of you will either be the head or the tail. So Teresa, what do you want to be? The head or the tail of your herd of 2? I want to be the head. Over about 4 months, Chrissy took that relationship with that horse and me and changed it into a relationship that I had that was absolutely glorious. I owned him for 10 years, and when I finally had to let him go, I wept grievously. It broke my heart. He was my best friend. That's the power of a mentor. With a mentee that will pay attention and listen and do what is suggested, even when it doesn't seem like it's right, that mentor does know. And you, as a Toastmaster, you either become a mentor or take on a mentee. Expect there to be dramatic change. You will take someone as a mentor or as a mentee, you will become. someone who will go from, oh, dread, take this, go, to, oh my gosh, I have to let it go. There's only two things that you need in a mentorship program, and that is a mentor and a mentee. And then how do you start a mentoring program? Who's in charge? I have a T on my slide paper. So, mentors are critically important to new members that come into a club. How do you start a mentor program? The mentorship program actually falls under the Vice President of Education's authority. From the Leadership Handbook, pages 25 and 26. As Vice President of Education, you schedule member speeches, verify the completion of projects, and serve as a resource for questions about education awards, speech contests, and the mentor program. You are an important source of Toastmasters knowledge for club members, and it is your job to become familiar with all aspects of Toastmasters educational program. To manage a mentor program, assign every new member a mentor and keep track of who is mentoring them. That's a big load of responsibility. A best club practice would be for the Vice President of Education to assign, to find someone to be the mentor coordinator of the club. And that person would speak directly to the Vice President of Education. That would be the person who would find the mentors for the new members that come in. Make the Vice President of Education aware of what's going on. So when a new member joins a club, the Vice President of Membership and the Vice President of Education are very involved with that member right to begin with, getting them sorted out, getting them grounded, what the expectations are, getting them into pathways, teaching them about Free Toast Host, Easy Speak, whatever it is, and then turning them over to the mentor coordinator who will find someone in that club that lines up with them and assign them that mentor.
So we gave you two handouts. And so one is the PowerPoint. The second handout starts with this mentor interest survey. So an important part of your mentoring program is you gotta have mentors. How do you find those mentors? Who wants to be a mentor for our next, this is one way. Who wants to be a mentor for our next member, our new member? Have people raise their hand. Is that the best way? Toastmaster is funny. They have these tools on their website that I've discovered recently. It's like, wow, this is really cool. I didn't know this was here until about 6 months ago. So the first one is that mentor interest survey. Give this out to your members and get it back. Your VPE can start this, or if you can get a mentoring coordinator for your club. That could be a mentoring champion in your club. At TLI, where all our officers are trained, we talk about having a committee to help each club officer. The VPE is one that's got a lot of responsibilities, so a committee for the VPE, one of them could be a mentoring committee, one could be a contest committee. If you have a mentoring committee, then you can have this come from the mentoring coordinator, and they take it back and they survey. Here's my list of mentors in the club. And it has a little bit about interests. This is from the Legacy program. I jumped into Pathways, both feet, trying to figure it out, and I unlocked the mentoring program in Pathways. Oh my goodness, is it awesome. When I got past level 1, I had to, what was it like to be a mentee? Well, that was my reflection. That was horrible. But when I opened the mentoring program, and oh my goodness, there is so much here. So that's some of what's in this packet as well, as comes from the Pathway mentoring program. So now that you have some mentors, then you want to, like I said, technology, I need to put a little down there on my keyboard. So find out who your mentors are, and then we have another tool
this is called the mentor assignment notice, and you have a copy of that in your handout, page 2. The mentor assignment notice starts out by giving the name of the mentor, whoever the mentor coordinator has determined would be the person's mentor, and the date, and then the information there. But what I really want you to pay attention to is if you want to be a mentor, or if you have a mentor, these responsibilities that Toastmasters has outlined here for the mentor are amazing. They have a bit of a timeline here at the very beginning, and then they have a broader sense. The things that I really want to call attention to are on the back page, and it's the very last bit that's called more mentoring tips. So the mentor coordinator would be someone who would work with the mentors and get them to understand what their responsibilities are, which are actually outlined really well here. And that very back part that says more mentoring tips, when you take a look at that, this really does a real quick rundown of really what a good, great mentor would look like. Availability, patience, sensitivity, respectful, flexibility, supportive of the club, knowledgeable, confident, a good listener, and concerned about others. So that's really in a nutshell what a mentor does and who that person is. The mentor has a great weight on their shoulders for that mentee. But when you have experience in Toastmasters and you know the value that you're going to get from Toastmasters, it is not difficult to offer yourself up to be any of these things for a mentee. And all of these things for a mentee. So the mentor assignment notice is one that take a look at when you go back to your clubs. Make sure that this is something that your Vice President of Education has a chance to actually look at.
So your protege or mentees has responsibles. This is going to be the third page in that packet, where the mentee name, and then it describes how the mentee or the protege is going to receive the maximum benefit down at this little small points. It doesn't have a backside like the other. But these two forms then match up. You fill this out, the mentee assignment notice, you give it to the new member who's just received their mentor, and they know who their mentor is, it has their contact information. And likewise, the mentor has the complimentary assignment notice, so they know. And so then you hope they will get together. But the protege has to be willing to learn, or to listen, or work with the mentor. This is where I failed pretty miserably being a mentee. The next page in our packet is very useful, that when you get a new member, that you can give them this new member profile, because there's some information on there that helps them identify your goals. This is, so one of the things I'm going to tell you about the difference between this one and the Pathways form. I couldn't get to the Pathways form until I was able to unlock the mentoring program in Pathways. This is available on the Toastmasters International website right now. You can Google, you go to the little search thing and say, I want a new member profile, and boom, up comes the form. And it has questions asking the new member, what are their goals? What goals are they thinking about as they are a new Toastmaster? And this is where I think myself as a mentee and my mentor, we didn't make that connection to help me establish what my goals were. I wasn't instructed, I wasn't intentionally challenged to think about what my goals were. And so this is a useful tool when a new member comes in and says, are you working on communication goals? Are you working on leadership goals? What do those goals look like? And so this is a little bit of information that the mentor will get. The VPE and the mentor coordinator will also review this with the mentor assignment form and the mentee assignment form to make that match. Because maybe I didn't have the right mentor for me. And so this happens in mentor assignments, that a good mentor may recognize that they are not doing well for their mentee, for their protege. And it's okay to say, you know what, I think we should find you another mentor if you're running a good mentoring program in your club. Because I don't think I can help you reach those goals that you want to reach. And likewise, the mentee, you go, the protege, you know, I'm not getting much input from my mentor. Can I have a different mentor? And we have to recognize that that's okay. Part of being Toastmasters, being in these clubs, we're developing relationships with the people in our clubs. And we may find that we have better relationships with some members and not with others. And that mentor-protege connection is part of that establishment of the relationships. And as this experienced Toastmaster mentioned, is oh my goodness.
Your fingers were doing the dancing on that.
Yeah. Oh, now I really messed up. Now I need the computer. Maybe I should stick to the computer that I know.
It's a good thing she knows it. I don't know them.
There you go.
Just point me and say, click.
Okay. We've done this in So, as a protege, these are the things that we're going to work on. When you think of, if I have goals, that means I probably want to stretch and grow in a particular area. I didn't realize 5.5 years ago that I wanted to be, that Toastmasters was really going to help me be an instructor. So I have a work group that we have things that change, and I got to teach them how to use it. It's like, I need to be able to convince them that they should use it. So some of those goals that I didn't know about that I really was working towards, I now know that I've grown in those areas. Okay, so this is the member profile.
All right, so now we're going to do a little role playing about what it would be like for a mentor. I'm going to need a mentor. She's going to be my new mentee who has been assigned to me. And this is just kind of a little bit what it looks like. Going off of this new member profile. Okay? So, hi Lori. I'm Teresa, and I have been assigned as your new mentor.
Oh, great. I'm so glad to meet you.
Well, I am really glad to meet you. I got your new member profile from our VP of Education, and I want to say I'm super excited to work with you. I love new members. They're my favorite people in the whole world in Toastmasters. I know it might get a little overwhelming. You let me know if I get a little too much for you, because I can tamp it down, but I just get real excited. Okay. So, Lori, according to this, you are an environmental chemist. How long have you been doing that?
Yeah, wow.
That long?
Yeah. It'll be 30 years this coming May.
Oh my goodness, do you like it?
I do. I really do like it.
Well, I've heard that quote that has said that if you find a job that you like, you never work a day in your life. So 30 years, that's a long time. Yeah? Oh my goodness. Well, what's the best part?
What's the best part? The view I have from my desk. I have this incredible view from my desk. I literally turn around and I'm looking at Foss Waterway. And if any of you know the history of Foss Waterway, it was a horrible, messy, awful Superfund site. And in my 30 years, I was part of the team that investigated what was in that waterway that was the problem. I was part of the team that, as they were cleaning up, didn't get it clean enough. And then for the last 13 years, we're in the post-cleanup stage where we've been checking every 2 to 3 years. Yes, it's still clean. And that's what I love about my job. I turn around and I see what I've done.
Oh my goodness, that must be so rewarding. So as I go down through this, and I'm going to come back to your accomplishments and interests in a minute, your communication and leadership goals, you have written in here a couple of things. And you know, Toastmasters is the best place you could go to learn communication skills and leadership skills. It's absolutely fabulous. You will not be disappointed at all with the skills that you gain here at Toastmasters. What objectives do you hope to accomplish as far as speaking and leadership goals?
I don't remember what I wrote.
Well-
What did I write?
The question says, how would you describe your current level as a speaker? And you said accomplished. So is speaking the highest interest for you at Toastmasters?
You know, I don't know that that was my primary interest.
Okay.
Because I've actually taught environmental chemistry to Sunday school students.
I wish I would have
And I was comfortable with that. But to be able to talk to a group of adults, I don't know if I would consider myself the same level of accomplishment.
Wow. So then leadership is more what you're interested in?
Yes, because I want to try to move my work group along in the direction I want to go.
Okay.
And I can't do that if I'm not a very good leader.
Super. You will not be disappointed in what you've learned here to be a leader. Okay, now let's pause. This is kind of how it goes. When you get that first introduction to someone, you're just bouncing off of what they've said here to find out a little bit about them. And as I do that, I learn some things about her. My gosh, she's an environmental chemist. That is like the farthest thing from my brain. I can't even, but she's my mentee. You know what? I don't have to worry about what she does for a living because we're going to talk about Toastmasters, and I love Toastmasters, so I can do that with her. So this is just that kind of get to know each other thing. What I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to give her a mentor assignment notice, and I'm going to get from her a mentee assignment notice. We're going to sit down and we're going to fill those out. And I am going to go over with her what I am going to do for her as her mentor, based basically on these last things on the mentor sheet. I'm going to tell her that I will be available for her at any time. She can call me any question she has. I'm going to be patient with her because she's a new member. And on down. And I'm going to explain these things to her so that she knows what expectations she has of me. And then we're going to go over my expectations of her. So it's a communication, it's a two-way communication, and it lays the foundation, it lays the groundwork for the relationship that a mentor and a mentee establish with each other. And that's very, very foundational. Just in closing, to wrap this up, it says that your accomplishments and interests are greyhounds. I'm a dog lover myself. Now, this pertains to mentors and mentees. At my house, I always want to have two dogs, one older dog, and then we get a young dog. Why? Because the young dog learns more from the old dog than I could ever teach him. Now, I don't know if that happens with greyhounds, but if it does, we'll have to share some stories.
It does happen like that.
I believe it does. I believe it does. So we'll talk dogs and we'll talk Toastmasters. Lori, I'll be happy to work with you.
Thank you.
All right. You'll have all of that information on the sheet that we shared. So that's kind of what it's like. You take that profile, you work with it, and you learn that person, and then you step into the mentoring relationship.
Excellent. Excellent.
Yes, we
Yeah, we wanted that up over, but that's okay. Next. What are some obstacles? And this is something I want to ask you. How many of you in your club already have a strong mentoring program?
How about growing?
Growing.
That's good.
I would say it's really strong.
How many of you would really like to have a fabulous club mentoring program? Okay, so what are some obstacles that you see or have encountered in having a club mentoring program?
I think, yeah, the size of your group.
Size of your club,
Follow through.
follow through.
Different communication styles, if you've done level 2 and you see that we don't speak the same language, even though we're all speaking English.
Yes. Yes.
Partly French.
Having someone step up to lead it.
Having someone step to lead it. Ebony's taking notes, that's why I want to repeat this. And David, what was that?
That's why there's protege branch with all of that.
Oh,
I think just understanding what's involved could be a hurdle, too.
okay, understanding what's involved.
I would say to go off that, I would imagine when putting together a membership program, a number of individuals, especially with the new pathways being so online and my understanding of manual not being there, they might think it's so much work, but it sounds like there's a great number of resources online, so I would suggest
So
recreating
if I
the wheel.
Summarizing, yeah, that people feel like they need to recreate the wheel of the program. Okay. Brian, you,
Someone yelled it out, but membership.
so membership, okay, getting new members?
Without having enough members.
Not having enough members.
Yes.
Well, in our club, we've had people come in who wanted and were looking for jobs, and so we mentored them, and then they find their job and then they can't come to leave.
So people leaving,
Yeah.
Yeah.
which I think goes along with club size.
Eligible mentors.
Eligible mentors is a good point. Charlotte is in one of our newer clubs in the district. And so they only have 2 experienced Toastmasters that came from other clubs. So how would a club like hers assign mentors when there really is already, there's only 2 experienced Toastmasters and there's 18 who signed up to be in their club?
That's my situation. I never love feedback from anybody here. It's just me. I had a sponsor, but she sponsor had to leave, and now it's just me and all these brand new, never been Toastmasters. Right. I would love to have more mentors.
That's a good obstacle to have, is no experience in the club, Kyle.
There is no rule that says your mentor has to be in your club.
There's also no rule that says a mentor has to be super experienced. They just need to be one step ahead of the person that they're mentoring.
Do we have the technology in Toastmasters International to, if you want to be a mentor and you don't have a mentee, to put your profile up on there, and then you can do kind of like a matching, like a matchup? Like, oh, I'm in Tacoma, but I'm a
There's some Facebook mentoring, Toastmaster mentoring groups that meet on Facebook.
So one of the recommendations I would make to that is every club has an area director. Ask the area director for some help, and we'll talk about that later.
Yeah. Can I bring up one thing?
Yes.
Some of the more experienced members go by the old rule of feeling like they only need to be a mentor for the first 3 speeches.
Okay.
That's what it used to say, and I'm having trouble convincing them that it's a bigger picture than that.
Right. Did you catch that, Ebony?
Yes.
Okay.
Can I reply to that?
Yeah.
So what I do is I negotiate with somebody who asks me to mentor them, especially through speeches. I'll say, well, I'll mentor you through the next 3 speeches, and then we renegotiate. Because your goals may change by the time that 3rd speech is done.
Yeah.
And so we do 3 speeches, we renegotiate. We do another 3 speeches, we renegotiate.
It's the mentors that are feeling like they don't need to stay with somebody past 3 speeches. That goes to my
I think
last
we can talk about that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. We have one more? Cheryl.
There are 2 types of mentors. There's one that does for the new member 1 to 3 speeches, the first 3 speeches. And then there's a mentor that's for existing members. So there's an existing member that's gone past 3 speeches that still doesn't feel comfortable or wants more mentorship. They can ask for a mentor, and it can be the same one or somebody else. But it also, I believe that even though there's those 2 types of mentors, that doesn't mean that anybody can have a mentor as long as they need one, as long as it's agreeable to the mentor and the mentee or protege that they continue to mentor. With some of the clubs that don't have very many mentors, that might be hard to do. In my club, there's only 2 of us that are experienced in mentoring, and so when you have more than like 1 or 2 new members coming in, it kind of strains the mentors that are available.
So I think we're going to talk a little bit about how to maintain a club mentoring program. So, we've identified and we need to identify our mentors. Most of our new members are going to be proteges. But as I heard from the former district director says, you should always have a mentor.
Yeah.
I've been in Toastmasters almost 6 years. I had that one mentor assignment almost 6 years ago. And so I'm looking for a mentor now because I think that is part of my growth. So always have a mentor or be a mentee.
I'd like to speak to a couple of the forms that are in that handout. This one that says Gig Harbor Toastmasters Mentorship Guide. This was created by a club down in Portland, and it basically follows, Cheryl, what you were saying, how mentors think, and Kyle, what you said, you know, the first 3 or 4 speeches. Yes, again, and I would agree with both of you, the mentorship does not have to stop there. However, if you are a mentor, and you have a whole bunch of new members to mentor, you can get really burdened down if you actually do what Toastmasters wants you to do, to be available. It is a very serious responsibility. So we did down in Portland create something that was, and I remodeled it as to go with pathways, to get a person through their first level in pathways, and through every single meeting role at least twice. And it's got a date on there, and it flows right into our next thing that talks about when a person, or rewarding or acknowledging, praising people when they accomplish something. But Toastmasters also has something for the protege to actually keep track of what their goals are, what they want, and the mentor and the mentee, the protege, can work back and forth with each other. These are just tools to help you work with whatever the situation in your club is, because each club is different. But each club has new members, and each club needs mentors. So take a look at these forms and see if they will work for you, and utilize them if they will. And change the name from Gig Harbor Toastmasters to your own.
Thinking of one other obstacle, and I think how these forums really can help, and that is spreading a delegation, because this really works as a teamwork. There's each person has a responsibility, and I can see where this really would help a new mentee and to develop and retain that friendship. Thank you.
And it also sets a time limit for that mentor, because if there are more new members coming in that need to be mentored, at least at this junction you can say, like Cheryl brought up, okay, this person isn't exactly ready to launch on their own. Let's give them to somebody who's a little bit more, but let me take the next new member and work them through that. So it does give a little bit of a guideline for timing of working with the new member.
Yeah, so how to maintain this? We identified obstacles, not having enough members, experienced enough to be mentee, enough members, experienced enough to be mentors. There's also finding time. I have a work club, and so we have an hour every first and third Wednesday for our club. So most of the members of our club also work. So how are we going to get together as a mentor and protege to have conversations revolved around the protege's goals? So that's what I mean, finding time. That's part of, if you're going to sign up to be a mentor, do you have the time to commit to meeting outside of the club time? Can we have some time in the club for mentor and mentee or proteges conversations? Can we take a speech time out and say, this meeting this month, this is 5 to 10 minutes for mentors and proteges to get together and have some conversations. That's what I mean by find some way to provide time for those meetings. The other part is, just like we celebrated Grindrod and the Triple Crown, celebrate when a protege accomplishes one of the goals that they were working with their mentor on. Recognize that in the club meetings.
In that form that has Gig Harbor Toastmasters Membership Guide, what we did was, once that mentee completed that form, then they were brought up in front of the club with the president, the vice president of education, their mentor, a certificate. You did it. And that's when we gave out the pen, because then they had some skin in the game. Then they actually knew what it meant to be a Toastmaster. and then continued on working in it. To recognize it, make a big deal out of it, because it is a big deal. Oh my gosh, it's a big deal.
Another challenge may be tracking. In that packet we gave you, there's a log for mentor and protege communication. And that's actually in the new Pathways program, that if you're a mentor in Pathways to get your mentor accomplishment, it's recommended you spend a couple hours a month having conversations with your protege and tracking it on that action log. So the mentor becomes part of the tracking system. Easy Speak and Free Toast Host also, both systems have a way that you recognize every person in the club may have their mentor. There's a place to download that list. And so you can recognize that in the software that's available for your club. You can also poll other clubs. How are they tracking it? And that's where I'm at, because I heard that BG's has a pretty good mentoring program, and I haven't yet connected with their BPEs. How are you tracking this? I want to know. I don't want to create a new wheel, just like her checklist. There's a checklist that exists for her club. I think that's a good thing to share. That's why we gave it to you, is you can take it and modify it and make it your own tracking sheet for your mentor mentees. Where do you go for support? And so I did a little query. Who can we ask? One, find out if there's clubs near you who have a successful club mentoring program. Find out what they're doing. Ask your area directors if they can make some connections for you. And I know our district leadership is pretty responsive. We can ask them the questions and they might think about it for a little while, and then they'll send us back, well, try this person. So I would say, how do you find support? Is like, don't be afraid to ask. So ask your leadership, your club coaches, your club mentors, your district leaders, and other Toastmasters.
So for a wrap up, we just want to say, or ask the questions, why? Because having mentors means you have better equipped new members. New members have more success. More success stimulates attendance and retention, which leads to continued member growth, and that's the goal. That's why a mentorship program is so important. What has to be in a mentorship program? The two things, the two keys, what were they, Lori?
Mentors and proteges.
And then lastly, how do you make this work? By identifying the mentors in the club, pairing mentors with mentees, and then have your Vice President of Education be the one who oversees a mentor coordinator. That's the why, the what, and the how. The how-to for having a mentorship plan in your club. Thank you.
Switch from mentee to protege. Seems like a greater responsibility on the part of the mentor, and it makes me feel important. I'm a protege. It is raffle time, and it's all about table topics. Some of us hate table topics, some of us love table topics. But I think we can all agree that a question such as, what's your favorite color and why? Is probably not a good question to stretch your member or guest to want to speak for 1 to 2 minutes. I chose this as a gift because there's over 750 questions. So if you don't pull something from here, maybe it inspires you to think of other questions. The person I'd like to draw the ticket is a young soccer fan. Thank you. Can you pick a ticket, please? Ooh, the ticket number, thank you, is 857500.
must be present to win.
We must be present.
Present when you're supposed to speak. I wasn't sure I Can I give a little plug for something? Just a real short thing. Pursuing Perfection, the Advanced Club in Tacoma, is going to be doing, some of you got the little flyer that Lori's holding up. We're going to be having an open house and doing all table topics. We never do table topics in that club. We do speeches and do 4 evaluations. We're instead going to be evaluating table topics. Nobody ever evaluates table topics. It will be 4 for each. But it's going to be a raucous, fun, crazy meeting. So it's on December 3rd in the evening in Tacoma. And all the instructions and everything are on the flyer, so be sure to come out. All right.
I hope you folks are ready for our last presenter, but definitely not the least. It's all about better evaluating. Evaluation is the backbone of Toastmasters. The quality of our evaluations determine the quality of our clubs and the depth of our learning. So we can improve. So how can we improve our evaluations and our club? Here to answer that question and share his experience and perspective on the art is 25-year Toastmaster, DTM, and our district director, Kyle Hall. That's not all. As you may know, Kyle was the 3rd place winner of the 2003 World Championship of Public Speaking. He credits the depth of his evaluative feedback he received in getting him there. Please help me welcome Kyle as he guides us to better evaluating.
Does everybody have a copy of the handout? Okay. Ebony's going to pass that out. Ebony and Teresa are going to pass that out. So I joined Toastmasters 25 years ago. And about 22 years ago, I was still a member of that club, and that club met at 6:30 a.m. in the morning. You have to be a special kind of nuts to belong to a club that meets at 6:30 a.m., and I'm that kind of nuts. I've been in the club long enough not to be a senior member of the club, but to be a seasoned member of the club. I'd learned a few things. And I came in the morning, and people were getting settled, and 2 guests walked in the door. 2 people who'd never been in our club just happened to show up. And as was our habit, we asked one of the seasoned members of the club to sit with that guest to answer questions. So this guy was right here, and I was asked to sit next to him. And I introduced myself. I'm Kyle. He's Dan, and you know. And the Toastmaster for the day is busy going through the agenda. And he's looking at it, making sure everyone's here. Oh, the timer's not here. Can I have a volunteer? And evaluator 2's not here. Can I have a volunteer to evaluate? And Dan next to me goes, I'll do it. And I went, oh! I said, so you're a Toastmaster? No. You've evaluated before? No. I suddenly realized, I mean, the Toastmaster's busy, he's wrapping up all this little pre-meeting stuff, making sure all the players are there. He's about to kick off the meeting. I've got about 23 seconds in which to tell Dan everything he needs to know so that he can deliver an evaluation that gives some value to the speaker and doesn't embarrass and humiliate him. 23 seconds or so. The little librarian gerbils in my head scrambled off into all the corners looking for something that I could use, and one of them dragged back something that one of my club mentors had taught me. And I turned to Dan and I said, look, this is all you're going to do today. While the speaker is speaking, you're going to keep 2 questions in your head. And when you stand up to evaluate them, all you're going to do is answer those 2 questions. And the 2 questions are, what is the speaker doing that's working for me? And what could the speaker do differently to make it work better for me? And if you just do those two, if you just answer those two questions, you'll give a good evaluation. Toastmaster kicks off the meeting goes on, speaker stands up, Dan scribbles a few notes. When it came time for Dan to deliver his evaluation, it was not an elegant evaluation. It was not a well-crafted speech. But he answered those two questions. And when he answered the question about what could you do differently, he actually said, well, you know, I think it would work better for me if you did this. He delivered value to the speaker by telling him what he did well and what he could do to make it even better. And he wasn't humiliated. Now, if you walk away from here with nothing else, remember those two questions. And you'll notice those two questions are on the top of page 1 of your handout. Now, before I go on any further, this is an 8-page handout. What I'd like you to do is take page 7 and 8, which is the last page, last sheet of paper, and just tear it off. And the reason is, I hope you'll mark this up, the rest of the handout up. Page 7 and 8, this is for you to take home and use. Take it home, Xerox it, use it over and over again, assuming you get some value out of this process. But that way you can write on the rest of this and not have to worry about it, because you've got a spare copy on page 7 and 8. Now you'll notice at the top of page 1, I have this kind of T-chart thing. One of the first things I learned from the person who gave me those two questions, it was one of my old club mentors, Diane Hitzel. And she taught me just a T-chart, and she would put a plus on one side and a minus on the other side. The plus, when she was listening to a speaker, on the plus side was all the things the speaker was doing well that worked for her. And on the minus side was all the things she didn't like about what the speaker was doing. And I've changed this a little bit, as we will. This is not a plus and a minus, it's a plus and a delta. Any mathematicians here? Delta is change. So I still use a T-chart to this day. What is the speaker doing well goes on the left side. What would I like them to change to make it work better for me? Goes on the right side. And if you're looking for a longer version of that, you can look at page 5. Yes, it says 4 here. I need to update my handout. So there's a couple of changes I'm making to my handout that I've made notes on. So page 5 is the long form of this. Now I've given you two questions, two fundamental questions about evaluating. And if all you ever do is use those two questions, you will be a satisfactory evaluator. How can we get better than that? How can we get deeper than that? Well, there's a lot of ways to do it. And the thing I want you to think about is adding new questions. So I gave you 2, but now there are more questions. Now, we mentioned Pursuing Perfection, the Advanced Club. Most of the advanced clubs that I visited here in District 32, if you go and speak at one of those clubs, you'll get evaluated by 4 people, and they each ask a different question. One of them is asking, how did I see you? One of them is asking, how did I hear you? They're just looking at vocal variety and voice. Another one's looking at, how did you structure your speech or the content of your speech, and another's usually looking at the manual. Now, that's one way to do it. And I've seen single evaluators use that same structure. Some of the other things to do, look at how is the speaker dealing with nervousness? How is the speaker passionate about their topic? Anybody here disagree with the idea that being passionate about a topic can make a difference? Really? A couple of years ago, before I started up the district leadership track, actually, the last chance I competed, my last opportunity to compete, I competed in my club, and I won, and I went to the area contest, and this was actually in District 2. I was in both districts at the same time. I was in District 2, and I have a reputation around District 2, because they're the ones I represented when I went to the World Championship. I have a reputation for being a serious competitor. I walked into that contest, that area contest, and I know there's people like, oh, Kyle's here. He's going to win. The contest chair was so sure I was going to win, he actually wrote in my name on the winning form before the contest started, which proved to be a mistake. Because I got my speaking butt handed to me by a guy who'd been in Toastmasters for 6 months. Because I walked in with a relatively well-crafted presentation that I thought was good and clever, and I kind of cared about. And he walked in with a presentation that he was so passionate about. And it was not well-crafted, but he cared about it. He was talking about reading to our children and the importance of reading to our children. He told about reading to his daughter, and until one night, you know, he's been reading to his daughter for 2 or 3 years, and one night she takes the book away from him and says, "Daddy, you're not doing it right." And she starts reading back to him. And the audience is like, and I was done. Passion will sell. Passion will convince. Passion will drive the speech. So one of the questions we should be asking ourselves is the person speaking with passion? How can we help them speak better with passion? Use my glasses. Now, eye contact. We talk about eye contact, especially with new members, all the time. Is the speaker using their voice? Do they seem knowledgeable, authentic, sincere? Now, knowledgeable, I think that's pretty obvious. Authentic and sincere. Is the speaker willing to be vulnerable in front of the audience? Are they willing to talk about when they fail? Are they willing to talk about when they have doubts? A lot of us, I was at a demo meeting once. We put on a great demo meeting trying to start a club. And afterwards I had a speaker come up to me and was like, "I don't want to speak like that. I don't want to be Tony Robbins." Yeah. And it's like, we don't want you to be Tony Robbins either. One is enough. But the point I was trying to make with him is, we want you to learn to be yourself up in front of the group. The art of public speaking is to learn to be yourself in front of larger and larger groups of people. And that means bringing all of yourself, the weaknesses and foibles, as well as the things you're good at. So is the person willing to do that? Are they able to do that? How do they organize the speech? Close, structure, things like that. Now, if you notice, for those of you who have worked at the Competent Communicator Manual, do you notice anything about the questions I'm asking? Because each of these questions comes right out of one of the exercises of the Competent Communicator Manual. Now, in Pathways, it's not quite as obvious, because the first speech is your icebreaker, the second speech you're doing it twice, you're learning about evaluation and how to incorporate, fourth speech is research. That's level 1. So it's not quite as obvious. You will, over time, work on eye contact and passion and using your voice and being authentic. And you'll work on these things eventually. But it's not quite as obvious. But we can start asking ourselves, as an evaluator, we can start asking ourselves these questions and making notes. How can they do it better? Now, one of the questions we should be asking ourselves is the speaker fulfilling the goals of the exercise? How do we know what the goals of the exercise are? What was that?
Objectives?
Yeah, how do we know what the objectives are?
Oh.
How do we know?
Because we asked the evaluator to read that before the speech is given.
Well, you're the evaluator.
Yes.
So it's on the
form.
evaluation form.
Right. It may be obvious, but we know what the goals of the exercise are, what the objectives of the exercise are, because we get the form from the speaker.
Yes.
If you're working in a manual, it's in the manual. If you're working in Pathways, it's on the Pathways evaluation form that you print out. What the goals of the exercise are, we get it, we read it. One of the other things we can look for is, what else is the speaker looking for? They might be working on this exercise, but there might be something else. Maybe they're working on storytelling, but they also want to learn to be funny. Well, how do we know what else they're looking for? You ask them.
Talk to them.
You talk to them. I like to call the speaker. When I'm evaluating, I like to call the speaker the night before. Say, hey, I'm evaluating you. What exercise are you working on? Can you send me the form? What else do you want me to look for? Great, I'll see you tomorrow. This has two values. The first is I get the information on what they're looking for. The second is you don't know how many times I've called the speaker and said, hey, I'm evaluating you tomorrow. And they go, I'm speaking! Yes, you are. And it's happened a lot.
That's scary.
Yeah.
Did you change the calling in 2 night speakers? Are we?
Well, I can tell you as a Toastmaster, when I'm the club Toastmaster, I am sending an email to everybody a week in advance, and I specifically name, Brian and Troy and Christine, you're speakers. I don't just send out the agenda and hope they read it. I actually put right in it, you guys are speakers. I need your information. Now, I've talked about evaluation at a high level, but what I want to do now is I want to break it down for you. Because one of the things that I think gets in people's way, especially when they're first learning to evaluate, is they're trying to do everything at once. They're listening to the speaker, and they're trying to write their evaluation at the same time. And we really need to break it down chronologically in a sense. So, we're going to break this down into watching and listening, planning, and then delivery. Now, the first thing I need you to think about is evaluation is really a Zen exercise. And what I mean by that is there's a concept that comes out of Zen meditation where you observe the observer. Let me give you an example. I was taking a meditation class. We're supposed to sit and listen and watch the thoughts. Imagine a thought is in a bubble and you watch it. And you're sitting there and I'm watching my thoughts and the thought enters my head that I'm bored. Now normally I would go, I'm bored, I'm going to get up and go do something else. That's my normal reaction. But instead I watched that thought. And I watched the thought that I'm bored. And it went away. And I was going to sit there and continue meditating. And then I had the thought, my butt hurts. And I watched that thought. And it floated up and went away. And I was able to sit there. And I stayed there for a while. And you learn to observe the observer. There's a part of me that's watching my own reaction to the fact that I'm meditating. Now, we need to do the same thing when we're a speech evaluator. So, Troy is giving a speech, and he's telling a heartbreaking story of, competing and losing. I mean, the speech takes us up and the speech takes us down. So there's an emotional roller coaster ride. Well, we need to notice when that's going on. My old friend and mentor, Bob Apple, would tell stories about his daughter's fight with cancer and how she was his hero and he was her hero, and it was a real tearjerker. And when you're listening to it, you can allow yourself to get caught up in the whole speech, but as an evaluator, you have to keep just enough emotional distance so you can watch what he's doing that helps you, that creates the emotional impact. So you need to be able to observe the observer. Sometimes it's hard. Sometimes we get so caught up and swept away in a really good presentation that we lose track. Okay, we admit that as an evaluator. We admit that the speaker got us caught up. But we try to keep that enough distance so we can observe the observer and notice what they're doing that's creating the effect in us. How do they create humor? How do they create emotional impact and so forth? And of course, we need to be taking notes. What are they doing? What could they do differently? We need to evaluate the speaker at their level. Like, when I evaluated Bob Apple, I would never talk to him about eye contact. He didn't need to hear about eye contact. He was in Toastmasters. He had been in Toastmasters for longer than I'd been alive when I met him. So he didn't need me telling him about eye contact. He needed to hear about how his stories worked or didn't work. And whether he was convincing the audience of his point or not. That's what he needed. So you need to evaluate, as best you can, the speaker at his or her level. Now let's talk about planning. You've taken your notes. The speaker's done, they're sitting down. You've got a few minutes. Hopefully, In my club, we do speeches, table topics, evaluations. Not every club does it in that order, but one of the reasons we do table topics in the middle is so the evaluators have more time to plan. When you're an evaluator, what's your highest priority?
Helping the speaker.
Helping the speaker. Giving value to the speaker. That's your primary job, is giving value to the speaker. Giving them some suggestions for improvement and reminding them of the things they did well. A secondary priority is inspiring them to do it again, to come back and speak again. I mean, you can give value to the speaker by slamming them and telling them what a horrible job they did, but you may not be inspiring them to come back. A third goal, if you're a skilled evaluator and if you have the spare brain cycles, might be to craft a good evaluation speech with an opening, body, close, and so forth. I don't always worry about that. You know, it's worth it. And of course, the fourth is if your club does, you know, best evaluator ribbon. Gee, can I win the best evaluator ribbon? I never worry about that. I just don't. I'm so much more concerned about delivering value to the speaker that sometimes go over time. I try not to. Now, why do people, especially new members, shy away from giving evaluations and especially giving suggestions for improvement in evaluations?
They don't think they
Christine?
They think everybody knows more than they do and they have nothing to offer.
Okay. They think people know more and they have nothing to offer?
They don't want to hurt someone's feelings.
They don't want to hurt someone's feelings. And I'm going to address both of those issues. But I want to really nail the I don't want to hurt someone's issues, hurt someone's feelings. A lot of us, especially when we're new Toastmasters, we really hesitate to give suggestions because we're terrified that they're not going to like us if we give them if you know they're going to be angry at us, you know, or hurt their feelings, whatever. I can tell you, as a speaker, I prepared a presentation. I'm going to the trouble of preparing it and delivering it. If you give me a whitewash that just says, oh, good eye contact, good, no suggested improvement, I am disappointed. I feel like I've wasted my time. So, from my perspective as an experienced speaker, if you don't give me suggestions for improvement, I feel I've wasted my time. That's one perspective. The other thing I want you to be aware of is there's a simple technique for delivering your evaluation and making sure the speakers never feel like you've slammed them. They never feel like they never feel hurt. That's the word. They never feel hurt. How many of you have heard about the sandwich technique? Okay, most of you. So the sandwich technique. You tell them something that they did well, you give them a suggestion for improvement, you tell them something else they did well. My mentor Diane taught me an improved sandwich technique, which is you keep the best thing that they did to the end. And you tell them something they did well, suggestion for improvement, then tell them the very best thing they did. Okay, that's better. My friend Jerry Butler taught me an even better technique. He said, when you're evaluating somebody, look for the thing that they do better than you. Look for the thing that they're doing that's better than you that you can learn from them. Now, you tell them what they did well, you give them a suggestion improvement, and then you tell them, by the way, you did this one other thing so well, I'm going to try to model what you did. I love the way you did eye contact. I'm going to try to do it like that. How could anybody be annoyed or upset with an evaluation like that? Now, they may not have something better than you, but look for it. And we'll talk about the how to deal with it if you don't think you have issues in a moment. Now, in terms of organizing, I like to use a mind map. And this is my little mind map, and it's on the back of, it's on page 8, the back of the page you tore off. But my opening for an evaluation, what are the objectives? What are the positive? What are the things that, what are the things I thought they did well, constructive suggestions, and then that powerful, that positive personal close. That's the what did they do so well that I'm going to try to model what they do, that I learned from them. So I like to use that mind map. Now let's talk about delivering. So there's some do's and don'ts about delivering your evaluation. Have any of you seen somebody who stands up to evaluate and all they do is they talk about the importance of evaluation?
Yes.
Yeah, seen it. Don't do that. Evaluate the speech. Don't talk about evaluation. That's not your job. How about the evaluator who stands up and repeats the speech? Anybody seen that? Don't do that. There's a guy in my club who's been in Toastmasters for 10 years, and I don't know whether he was just having a bad night, but he stood up and he said, first you talked about this, and then you talked about this, and then you talked... Don't do that! You're here to evaluate the speech, not repeat it. Have you ever seen somebody who evaluates the person or the message rather than the speech? Now, so I'm going to... In my old home club, there was a guy, and I'm going to call him Joe, and he's kind of what I would call a Cro-Magnon Toastmaster. He was not politically correct. His favorite topics were his latest dating techniques with women, earning money, and politics. Those are his favorite topics, and he would do other things from time to time. Every once in a while, he'd pull one of these out, and especially when he's talking about, he referred to as dating as interviewing, because he was looking for his next wife. And I would watch some of the women in the club turn redder and redder while he was presenting. He was not politically correct at all. But when you stand up to evaluate him, you're not supposed to evaluate him on his message. You're supposed to evaluate him on his delivery. Now you might say, this talk was not appropriate for this audience. But here's how you might have changed it to make it more appropriate for the audience, or something like that. But we're not here to evaluate Joe on his political points of view, or his dating points of view, or anything else. We're here to help him to improve how he talks to people, how he delivers his messages. Have you ever seen an evaluator who starts off the evaluation well and then goes down a personal story rabbit hole? You've got 2 or 3 minutes to deliver value, and they spend a minute and a half telling you about how their granny once gave them valuable feedback when they were 5. And unless you can tell the story really quickly, and it's really pertinent to the point you're making, don't tell it. Leave your personal stories out. There isn't enough time in an evaluation. How many of you have seen speakers who ignore all the things speakers do well? Even if all they're giving is suggestions for improvement, and they're phrased positively, if all you do is give suggestions for improvement and nothing they did well, that's a slam. They must have done something though. Even if they're a horrible speaker giving their first speech, they had the courage to stand up and give it. Even if they read their speech off a piece of paper, well, they had the wherewithal to sit down and write it. You can find something positive to say about it. Now, I gave a talk. My college roommate and my father and I hiked up Mount Monadnock in southern New Hampshire. And years later, when I'm out here in Washington State, I gave a talk on this hike up Mount Monadnock. Now, the gentleman who stands up to evaluate me is Kyle. I really liked it when we were talking about going up the mountain. But I want you to give this talk again. And this time, when you give it, I want you to be the mountain. What do I do with that?
Become a mountain.
What do I do with that? I'm a big guy, but I'm not a mountain. What do you do with that? If you're going to give suggestions for improvement, make them specific. And doable. Be louder, project more, use bigger gestures, but be specific. Not be the mountain. Now here's another one. Don't just tell people. One of the single best ways to make a point in an evaluation is to demonstrate. Now, years ago, when I was over in District 2, I was a member of a club called Toastmasters Extraordinaires, and I was featured speaker one day, and I was giving a talk. Now, the pants I was wearing were relatively new. I had not had them hemmed up, so they were ½ an inch too long, and my heel kept treading on the back of the pants. So I'm walking around, and I'm giving my talk, and I'm tugging on my pants. And I'm not thinking about it. It's not too bad. I'm just completely unconscious on my part. Just walking around and tugging. And I give my talk. Now, in extraordinaires, we don't do the 4 speeches. We just give the evaluator 7 minutes of evaluation.
Wow.
And then we do 7 minutes of round robin. You get a lot of feedback. Well, Walter is a friend of mine, and Walter's evaluating me. So he's got 5 to 7 minutes to talk. And he talks about all the things I do well and all the suggestions for improvement. Never once says anything about my pants. But all during his evaluation, he's doing this. For 5 to 7 minutes, he's tugging on his pants while delivering the rest of the evaluation. Do you think I got the point? Do you think the pants got hemmed up? Do you think there was a lot of laughter at my expense?
Was that okay?
Yes, it was. Yes, it was.
Oh, no.
So, I mean, one of the next points I have down here. So, in Walter's case, he was demonstrating.
Yeah, he was.
And one of the things, the next point is don't be boring. How can you be boring? You can add humor. One of the best ways to add humor is to exaggerate. We had a young lady come join my club, and she was a wonderful, young, enthusiastic lady who spoke really fast. And she stood up and she gave her talk, and she was all of it here, and she was talking about this and great. I was evaluating her, and I stood up and said, Laura, that was a really great speech, and I really enjoyed listening to it, but there's one thing I want you to do, there's just one thing I really want you to do. I want you to pause and take a breath and slow down. And I'm demonstrating. And created some laughter while doing it. So include that in your evaluations. Exaggeration, use of humor. I mentioned not going overtime. I was evaluating, I mentioned my friend Jerry Weltman, who gave me the positive personal close. He was doing a speech on trying to add humor into his speech, and he was supposed to end his speech with a joke. The joke didn't work. Well, I can't coach Jerry in how to tell a joke in a humorous way in 2 to 3 minutes. I just can't. It was too bad. So I evaluated everything else, and I said, Jerry, we'll talk offline about that, how to tell a joke bit. Because it wouldn't work. So I just scheduled that, and we actually had coffee later on and talked about it. Now, how not to whitewash. And that comes back to especially if you're new, how do you always deliver value to the speaker? And this is one place where, as a teacher of evaluation skills, I do something I haven't seen anybody else do. Maybe somebody's doing it, but I haven't seen it. It is my opinion that you, as the evaluator, are responsible for making sure the speaker gets value, whether or not that value comes from you. So if you're listening to a speaker and you have no suggestions for improvement, now it might be because that speaker's just wonderful, or it might be because your mind is elsewhere, or it might be because you're a new speaker and you just don't have, you're new to Toastmasters, you're a new evaluator, a new speaker, you don't have the depth of experience to make these suggestions. That's fine. Ask somebody else to help. You're giving your evaluation. I'm giving my evaluation. I have no ideas. I'm going to send around a note to Christine and say, Christine, can I call on you during my evaluation for any suggestions for improvement? Or, if I don't have a Christine in the group that I know will have a suggestion, I'll just ask. Hey, this is the thing they did this well and this well and this well. I have no suggestion for improvement. Anybody here have a suggestion for improvement for our speaker? Somebody will have an idea. Now, you have to be careful when you're doing that, because you might have the person who loves to talk and likes to tell long stories, and they might want to go down the rabbit hole. You've got to control that, because you only have 2 to 3 minutes. But, that's why I would rather send around a note to Christine and call on Christine specifically, if I can. But if I can't, then I'll just ask. And I've seen that work in clubs, where a new evaluator, they can talk about all the things they saw that impressed them, but I'm too new to have any suggestions of improvement. Any of you guys. And 3 or 4 hands will go up, and that person will get some value out of the presentation. And that way, the need of the speaker is met, and the evaluator gets experience.
Can I say one other thing, Kyle?
Sure.
Although what you said is much better. I was told when I was new and didn't know what to say in evaluations that if I could not think of anything to offer the speaker to improve upon, I could tell the speaker what I learned from the speaker's technique and how I plan to use that myself because
And that's that powerful personal close that Jerry Weltner was talking about.
okay.
So I think it's worth including that, what you learned, but you still need to give at least a suggestion for improvement, even if it doesn't come from you. Now, we've spent almost 40 minutes talking about evaluations. What is the single most important role in your club? I'm asking, what is the single most important role in your club? What's that?
Feedback.
No! The single most important role in your club is not the evaluator. It's not the speaker. The general evaluator.
Oh, thank you.
If you are an evaluator, you are giving value to one person, the speaker. Yeah, some of the other speakers, some of the other members of the club might absorb it if they're paying attention, but your focus is on giving value to that one speaker. If you are the general evaluator, you get to give value to the entire club because you're providing feedback on the whole club. Now, what do you evaluate if you're an evaluator? What is part of your purview? See this little agenda up here? Almost the entire meeting. See this little agenda up here? Everything that is grayed out is a purview of the general evaluator. You can evaluate the Toastmaster. You can evaluate how the President or Sergeant at Arms kicks off the meeting. Thought for the day, Toastmaster's comments, how the Toastmaster introduces the various players. You're not evaluating the speakers. Skipping the speakers. You can evaluate the table topics master. You're not evaluating the table topics speakers. You can evaluate the evaluators. One of the single best things you can do for the club is give the evaluator suggestions for improvement on how to be a better evaluator. You can evaluate the reports, assuming the reports come before the general evaluation. Have you ever seen somebody do a grammarian's report that lasted 5 minutes long? I have. That's a little too long. David?
I suggest you change the shading and put that on what you don't evaluate.
I will consider that, David. Did anybody find my shading confusing?
Yeah.
Yes?
That's harder to read though, when you reproduce it too.
Oh, okay.
Because you're getting old, David.
Represent that remark.
Okay, I want to talk about being effective.
I have a question.
Okay.
So it was pointed out at one of these kinds of events that the general evaluator does not evaluate the speakers, but it's killing the general evaluator that the speaker did such and such and the evaluator didn't handle it. So in his evaluation, he says, why didn't you address the fact that the speaker did whatever it was and how that could have been done better by, you know?
Well, okay, so you brought up a question. You brought up a question that often comes up, and you brought up the answer. The question is, a speaker's doing something, can I comment on it as general evaluator? And my answer is no, unless you answer it in the form of feedback to the evaluator. If I was doing the pants tugging thing and my evaluator didn't mention it, then it would be open season on the general evaluator to mention to my evaluator, why didn't you mention that Kyle was tugging on his pants?
Bypass him.
You know, and if you're not commenting to me, you're commenting to the evaluator on something something obvious they missed.
So you can tell the evaluator what they missed.
Yes.
But you're not looking at the speaker, you're talking to the speaker through the evaluator.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Now, what are some of the things you should be looking for as general evaluator? I mean, I have seen so many people who take the general evaluator role and they treat it as a non-role.
Yeah.
They stand up and go, well, our meeting started on time and it looks like we're ending on time and it was a fun meeting. That's my evaluation. I've seen that in various versions of that so many times. And they're wasting an opportunity to give the club feedback. Who is talking to the guests? And are the guests given a chance to introduce themselves? Are the guests given an opportunity to stand up and say, you know, who they are and how they found the club, especially how they found the club? Because you want to know that, right? Are they told that they're going to be given a chance to participate later in the meeting, but they have the option to say no? You know, so Does the president introduce the Toastmaster? Now, or a president, sergeant arms, whoever kicks off your meeting, I don't care who kicks off your meeting, but whoever kicks off your meeting, do they introduce the Toastmaster? And by introduce, I don't mean say, here's Lori. Actually have an introduction. As the incoming Toastmaster, it's my job to write an introduction for me and give it to that person who's going to be introducing me, and it's the perfect time to set up my theme for the meeting. Now, the Toastmasters introducing people. They're introducing speakers, they're introducing the players, they're introducing the general evaluator. There's a lot of introducing going on. Do you know that one of the roles of the Toastmaster, and one of the reasons we practice it, is so we can become really good at introducing people? It's actually a skill to be able to introduce somebody, to get the audience to sit up and go, ooh, I want to hear this. Part of that is the quality of the intro that's written. That's the speaker's job. The other part of it is the quality of the introduction delivered by the Toastmaster. That's the Toastmaster's job. We get to practice it and do a good job. And if they're not doing a good job, it's the general evaluator's job, poke them. And if they are doing a good job, it's our job to tell them that. Table topics. Now, we do not, we don't judge the people who speak, who do the table topic speaking, but table topics master. Is the topic they chose, the topics they chose, are they easily accessible to the audience? Does the audience understand them? I have a friend who likes to collect conspiracy theories. He doesn't believe them, but he likes to collect them. He thinks they're amusing. He wants to do the table topics on conspiracy theories, and people didn't get it. He's like, tell us about the last time the black helicopter started over your house. People are like, what? What are you talking about? It took him longer to explain the table topics question than for anyone to answer. So it didn't work. What is the purpose of table topics?
Give everybody a chance to speak.
Give everybody a chance to speak. Everybody who doesn't already have a speaking role,
Yes.
like speakers and evaluators and Toastmasters, a chance to speak. That's one.
How do people be able to speak extemporaneously?
Well, helping those people just speak extemporaneously.
Make a small speech so you can mention a point in a closing.
I'm not going to agree with you. I'm not saying you're wrong, but I'm not going to agree with you. The point I want to make is we get everybody a chance to speak. We give the guests a chance to speak. And table topics is the single best opportunity to create laughter in your club.
Or it does.
Hopefully, but not everybody. If your table topics question is tell us about the last pet you lost. As a general evaluator, you may be evaluating the table topics master on how to create topics that create a more opportunity for humor.
One other thing, you get to know your club members.
You get to know your club members.
I like that.
Now, I would love to talk more about being a general evaluator, because being a general evaluator is the single most important role in your club. For my home club now is a pretty good club. I think we're on the verge of becoming a really good club. 5 years ago, it was a mediocre club. We were 12 members. Most of the speeches retired. A lot of those evaluations were whitewashes. The only reason I joined the club was it was the only club in my town. I actually looked at the clubs on either side, and that one wasn't any better, this one was too far away, and so I joined this club. But I started talking with some of the other members, and myself and a couple of the other people who'd been in Toastmasters a while and wanted a better quality club, we conspired. We conspired to take the general evaluator role as often as we could, and we used it. Push, gentle prodding. Be better at your Toastmaster job, be better at your table topics job, be better at your evaluator job. And 5 years later, this is a different club. And what? We're not 12 members anymore, now we're 20 members. Because we're a better club. And the speeches are better, and the evaluations are better, and the Toastmastering is better. It's a better club. And I think it's because that there were some die-hard members who gave themselves over to doing a really good job as being a general evaluator. Evaluation is the heart and soul of Toastmasters. It's the heart and soul of our meeting. And the quality of our evaluations, whether it be speech evaluation or general evaluation, determines the quality of our club experience and how much we learn. So I hope you'll take these ideas back to your club. I hope you'll share it with them. I hope you'll take page 7 and 8 and try using it. You know, this is for note-taking. Plan your speech and deliver it. I hope you'll take this back and feel free to share it with your club. Does anybody have any questions before I close?
I wanted an example of, you talked about being the mountain.
Yeah.
What could he have said instead that would have given you specific feedback?
Well, okay, in order for me to understand what he could have said instead, I would have to know actually what he meant. And I never did learn that. But, so, one of the classic things I've seen is, you know, you need more vocal variety. That's general. Vocal variety, what does that mean? You want me to talk faster, slower, louder, softer? You want me to talk in voices? You want me to do Scooby-Doo? You know, what do you mean by more vocal variety? We need to be specific. I want you to speak louder. I want you to project to the back of the room. I want you to do a stage whisper. And when you're doing a stage whisper, it's small. When you're doing that stage whisper. We need to be specific. Does that help?
Yeah.
Okay. Other questions?
I just have a comment about the introductions, Bill. When I write an introduction for myself, I like to take it to the Toastmaster who's going to read it and read it to them. Because this is how I want this to sound. This is the words, and I'll bold words that I want to be emphasized. I'll even put in a pause, the word pause, in red. This is where I want you to let this sink in, so that the introduction really has the impact that I want it to have.
So, did you all hear what Terry said? So I think that's an excellent idea. And I will tell you, as Toastmaster, I've done the opposite. I've had speakers send me introductions, and they're crappy introductions. And I'll write back and say, hey, thanks for the introduction. Hey, you know, I've got an idea. Do you mind if I make a suggestion? And I'll rewrite their intro and send it back to them. You know, can we do it this way? And usually they go, yeah, sure. Now, I Toastmastered a conference a couple of years ago. And it was a Toastmaster conference, but they had 9 speakers who were all professional. I had to gather all their intros. 8 of those 9 speakers did not know how to write an introduction. They were horrible, and I had to rewrite them and send them back. Now these are professional people, and they don't know how to write an intro. So I never get in anybody's face as a Toastmaster if they don't know how to write an intro, but that doesn't mean I won't turn around and say, hey, could we do it this way? Other questions?
Yeah, I have a question. I just completed level 1 of my first Pathways program, and now we're to the place where we're discussing being an evaluator, and they say that, or suggest that you should focus on getting feedback rather than advice. An example would be, I noticed you were doing this rather than saying you looked nervous or something, and here's what I would do to not come off that way. My question to you, because of this fantastic presentation on evaluating, is how do you provide feedback, how do you provide this value that you speak about without offering or giving too much advice?
Okay. So here's the key thing, and I actually forgot about this until I was doing exercise 2, level 1 in Pathways. I'd forgotten about it for a while. But the key thing in delivering all your feedback, whether you're making positive comments or suggestions, is that they are I statements. I thought you seemed nervous to me. I think you might try this. Not you were nervous, because they might not have been nervous. A lot of times you'll see people, and they don't appear to be nervous, but they are. The reverse can be true as well. Making I statements. I think you did a marvelous job at eye contact. I think the speech would be improved if you could work on vocal variety, and specifically being louder, because I was in the back of the room and I couldn't hear you. Okay, last question.
Question about order. So for each speaker, you have the title, who the speaker is, the introduction, and the objectives. We're kind of tripping over, is the Toastmaster doing part of those and the evaluator doing part all at the same time before the speaker speaks?
So different clubs do it different ways. I know some clubs where the evaluator stands up and the Toastmaster has the evaluator stand up and read the speech objectives, and sometimes they get the speech title, and usually the time. And then the Toastmaster gives the intro. Sometimes all that is done by the Toastmaster. It doesn't really matter which, but here's the thing. All the boring Toastmaster stuff, the objectives of the speech, the time, all that comes first. Whatever the person wrote to try to get the audience to sit up and take notice, the actual introduction, assuming you're going to do this somewhere outside of a Toastmasters Club, there's the sexy part of the intro to get the audience to sit up and take notice. That part should be done last. Does that make sense?
Just before.
Just before, right.
As in introducing the speaker.
Exactly. The last thing you want to do is give all this sexy intro, and here's Kyle to talk about better evaluating. Oh, by the way, it's going to be 35 to 45 minutes long, and he's doing this exercise, and Brad's evaluating, because you just stolen all that momentum. You want to do the sexy intro stuff last, all the boring Toastmaster stuff first.
Because you never know when the speaker's quote is packaged.
Okay, take this home, use it, try it, see if it works for you, and if it does work for you, please use it in your clubs, because improving our evaluation skills individually, 1%, can dramatically improve the quality of our club.
There was a lot of meat there. That was good. I really enjoyed that piece. We are rounding out here. I have one last raffle. It's a set of conversation cards. The categories are creative, stories, thought-provoking, personal, and silly. One question would be, what sounded awesome until you tried it? You all have one of those series, right? Doing marriage.
857514.
Before you go, I have a few thank yous. Thank you to everyone who showed up today. It was a sunny Saturday afternoon. You're running errands, you're spending time with your family, you're getting ready for the holidays. You chose to be here for a few hours. Thank you so much. Thank you to my area directors, Lori, Brad, Sam, Teresa. I was spending time for us to debrief. Homemade refreshments. Christine provided the trail mix, which was good enough to sneak into the movies. Rose, I'm going to have to put you on the spot here because I've been a fan of yours for a couple of years. If you've been to these events and you see they look professional, and they are, homemade desserts, Rose Grindrod makes those. They are amazing. I don't eat a lot of sweets, but I feel zero guilt eating one or dessert.